Europe from Olivia Smith making her mark to Tajon Buchanan's hat-trick in La Liga. Plus, the NSL heats up with drama as Latifah Abdu drops a bombshell, wanting out of the Montreal Roses. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Just Soccer. Annie Petrula with you, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, former Canadian international and analyst Amy Walsh. There's a lot to get into this week, my friend. Let's begin with some good news here in Tajon Buchanan. The man is back. He kicked off his club season in style with a hat-trick, becoming just the second Canadian player to score a hat-trick in Europe in the Big Four, because we know Jonathan David did it with Lille. He does it for Villarreal in a 5-0 victory. When you see a Canadian performing like this in Europe, what does it tell you about his development, Amy?
I think it just speaks to Tajon, this trajectory that he's on and what he's doing to change minds about Canadians. We've talked about that with regards to Jonathan David, but Tajon, I think you look at this year, he had the horrific injury. He goes back, he's with Inter, he's not getting the playing time. Is he really a wingback? This is another discussion. I think he's in the right place at Villarreal. He's going to get meaningful minutes, but it's off the back of a really confident and a convincing series of performances with our men's national team. And now he's going to club and doesn't miss a beat. And this is a statement performance, Andy. But the eye test, Tajon Buchanan is doing everything. I don't think to change minds at this point, because I think he's cemented himself in that discussion for a really exciting winger who's dynamic, who is instantly going to be impactful and break a game wide open for the national team and for club. But now he's in the right spot where he's valued. He's going to get those minutes. And we saw what he did with Canada over the summer. I think you project forward to next summer with our men's national team, and he is going to be the guy for Jesse Marsh's Canada.
He's definitely back. Confidence-wise, I mean, some of those goals, he's nutmegging guys out there. He's just looking fantastic. And physically, he's back. Because if you look at the last few years, and these weren't just small injuries here and there, he had a hamstring that kept him out. I mean, when you look at 2 years ago, he missed over 100 days.
Yeah.
You know, last year, again, substantial amount. And obviously the year prior, it was a broken tibia. But long periods of time, he is out of play. So how does it feel like, even just as a player, to come back and just trust your body again?
That's a big thing. Like to be confident in yourself, to trust yourself, to not second guess every single action, whether it's in training or in these big matches or something of magnitude. We're seeing Tajon Buchanan imbue that squad and his own game with the sense of swagger. It's the round off back tuck. It's the national team on that touchline, the Meg, and then he bullies a defender, beats him, shakes off a challenge, gets to the byline, crosses it perfectly to Johnny David, or he's doing it himself, where that was not a cross. That was, I'm going to beat this goalkeeper with a blistering shot at the near post and maybe humble him in the process, but this is what I'm going to do. But as you're saying, that confidence and just finding his footing again and realizing that he can do this, and now can he replicate these types of performances, I think is the next question. But did you see, Andy, do you see the Villarreal kind of album cover featuring Tajon? It looked like a Pink Floyd album, a rainbow in the background. It had like Tajon doing the round off back tuck at the front, and then like kind of a thoughtful Tajon in a background. Like it was his album cover. So he's gonna this is box office stuff by Tajon Buchanan, and then the album to back it too.
But he might have company. It might be like Tajon Buchanan and the band being one other person, but that is still a big person in Taniolo O'Shea, because it seems like he's going to be joining him in Villarreal, two young Canadians making waves in Spain. Did you ever think that would happen one day, where I'm sitting here talking to you going, Tajon Buchanan and Tanny both playing for Villarreal less than a year out before a World Cup?
I know. I think this is the World Cup effect, players kind of feeling that itch and understanding that there's an urgency about ensuring that their club game needs to be at a high level so they can translate that on the national team stage. But a Canadian tandem playing for Villarreal, playing Champions League football and going back to, no, I never thought that you would see the day. I think it's arrived sooner than I would expect, but I think aligning with what our Canadian women are doing on the world stage, I think this Canadian brand in world football, that perception is changing, and this is a common theme that I come back to, but we are changing minds, and it's happening via individual performances and big moves like this. But I think this is a good one for Tani Oluwaseyi. Like, it's going to be Tani time soon. We saw what Tajon did with the hat trick. It's going to be Tani time soon. I mean, the move, I don't even know is official at this point, but he has been arguably one of the best strikers in MLS for the last 2 seasons. Like, the offensive output for Minnesota, and I think he's going to a setup in Spain where he's going to be used under manager Marcelino. Their forward situation is a bit tenuous right now. You get somebody like Tani, he can be inserted almost immediately into this side and get big minutes, feel valued the way that Tajon clearly is. And then these are 2 guys that can kind of stoke that fire, and not necessarily a rivalry, playing different positions, but help one another along to kind of build their credibility on the biggest of stages. But I think it could be a perfect move for Tani, and no better place to see 2 Canadians playing their trade.
I don't think anyone can confidently say it's going to be Tani or Laren or Promise David or Jebison. We don't know yet. So where these guys land, where they play, where they get, minutes under them, confidence under them, I think that'll go a long way with the national team and Jesse Marsch, because that spot next to Jonathan David is very much up for grabs. And speaking of the man, Jonathan David had himself a great debut with Juventus, and he ended up scoring a goal in his debut, had some great chances in the first half as well. But try to put this into context, because this is a Juventus side this is a storied franchise, a storied history, who the last few years has not looked storied at all. They signed Jonathan David. It was such a big deal. I can say this, that a Canadian, by the way, he was in his Canadian kit, was on the front cover of an Italian sports section.
Yeah.
Like, what? Right? The Italians just put the Italians. You know what I'm saying? Like, they put him on that front cover, and he didn't disappoint. He scores a goal. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of people still see Ligue 1 at the more of the bottom there when you're talking about the big leagues. But do you think if he goes on to have a great offensive output for Juventus, that'll put him more in the global conversation of strikers?
Absolutely, because that's one of the things that was counted against him, was that he was playing, yes, in one of the top 5 leagues, scoring 87 goals in 178 League One appearances, only second to Kylian Mbappe, it should be noted. How many goals did he score in penalties? So these are the things that have kind of dogged him and maybe plagued him a little bit when he was looking for a move. It came a little bit later than we thought. I think he arrives to Juventus. There were big expectations. Not necessarily big shoes to fill, but I think he's got his scoring boots on firmly, and it's, Andy, you can judge my Italian here, arriva l'uomo di ghiaccio. Did I say that well? The Iceman cometh to Juve. Was that
wow,
good?
gotcha.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ghiaccio?
Yeah.
Okay. The Iceman cometh. He has arrived. So he scores. You didn't
have to choose. You didn't choose an easy line either, did you?
No, I didn't. But I really wanted to say the Iceman cometh. But I mean, he is the only League One player to score 10 or more goals in each of the last 5 seasons. Before that, he won the Golden Boot in Belgian top flight with Ghent on 18 league goals in 2020 and 2021. So when we think about goals, we think about increasing kind of his world standing and his own calling card for the player that he is, almost cementing himself like Tajon's doing. But I think arguably he's been in that discussion for one of the top strikers in the world. If he can replicate these numbers in Serie A, where you know that the tactical emphasis on defense might be a little bit more rigorous than it is in Liga, can he fight through the season, continue with that output? I think superlatives, when you think about Jonathan David, lethal, clinical, prolific, consistent. If he can do that in Serie A, then he is absolutely in that very same conversation.
Well, I think Italian fans, in particular Juventus fans, are going to learn very quickly what the Uomo di Ghiaccio is all about there.
Because said it much better than me.
But Juventus, can you imagine if he gets this club back to the top, if he can get this club back into Champions League? I mean, what sculpture are they going to do of him? Because again, and this is not to, belittle any other team, it is Juventus, right? They won 9 straight. and then they've been floundering since, can't really score. My side, Napoli, has been doing, they picked up, the torch there. But Juventus wants to get back, and imagine if he ends up doing that. Let's get to some drama here.
Yeah.
Because the Northern Super League actually has its first big player power moment here, where Latifah Abdu, the leading scorer for the Montreal Roses, is reportedly asked to leave the club, which is, a shocker for a lot of people. A star in her prime as well wants to walk away. What was your reaction when you heard this?
Stunned. I think this is drama that maybe arguably you think adds eyeballs to the league, people maybe tuning in that haven't before to see what's happening, but sent shockwaves, I think, through the league, through that locker room. Certainly, there was Gianna Creighton, who departed Halifax Tides following a mutual agreement between player and club. But she set the precedent, I guess, for this player-centric approach. If the player does want out, you know that the club, the league is going to work with them. But that player was struggling for playing time. So you send her on and you hope she has a better opportunity somewhere else. This is very different. This is arguably your face of the franchise, your first ever signing, a prominent player and personality league-wide. This was a bombshell, Andy. So it was apparently a misunderstanding that occurred during her technical assessment, according to sporting director Marinette Pichon, when they were evaluating her performance through the first half of this inaugural NSL year. And then the team had alerted Latifah and her agent that they wanted to trigger her option for 2026. And then I don't know if the misunderstanding was in the evaluation of her technical abilities or performance, or with that option being triggered. But it was a surprising turn, and one that I think even her teammates weren't expecting, that then the next communication is, I want from the player, and Latifah, I want my contract terminated. So it's a big deal. There was a great response, because I saw this going one way or another. It was either going to galvanize the group, or they were going to get absolutely killed in the next game, no in between. And you saw them go to a very emphatic victory, a 2-0 win at home versus the Calgary Wilds. I imagine the player will be seeking a move back to Europe, where she was before, playing in Liga. I would find it very surprising if she found a move somewhere else in NSL. So I see her going elsewhere here, and the club has said they're going to do everything they can to facilitate a move for the player.
So if I'm understanding correctly, did she not like the assessment? Is that kind of what it seems to be leaning more towards, that she didn't like the assessment that was given and just said, well, then fine, if that's the case, then let's move?
It could be that's what's being implied, or at least that's what we know at this point. But it seems a little bit strange that that could lead a player who was so foundational to the club, was emblematic of all the values that they wanted to espouse, both on the pitch and off the pitch, that all of a sudden she wants out.
Let's go overseas. Let's get some international storylines in here as we play a little game of fair or foul. We know how this works. I ask you a question. Fair as you agree, foul as you don't agree. And the big international story, let's start with Alexander Isak. So his future at Newcastle is up in the air. We're hearing about transfer links to Liverpool. Is that going to happen? Is it not going to happen? The player clearly unsettled. All you have to do is go to his Instagram, and he's not shy to voice his discontent right now with his club. So the question is it fair or foul to say Newcastle has to sell Isak?
Fair. I think here, not even delving into the details of all of this, of that shock statement by Isak to say that those relationships were broken, that they couldn't be mended or rectified. I think you just look at this, Andy, from a player perspective, and when a player has been so public about being unhappy in a situation for whatever reason, you absolutely have to get rid of said player if there's no way back. So otherwise it might lead to, rot in the dressing room. It's hard to get rid of, it may damage the long-term culture of the club, and it might linger and affect results. So I think it's absolutely fair that they have to sell Isak, because you might argue that he's being a little bit petulant and he didn't need to go public with this. But more and more you're seeing this as a trend, I think, in the world game, whether it's the men's game or the women's game, that players are leveraging the influence that they have on their own social media with the millions of followers that they have to sway things internally with clubs, to force a club's hand. But I think here, Newcastle has no choice but to get rid of Isak.
That's an interesting one. That I feel like that could be a conversation for another day because before you would just do things behind closed doors, you'd have your agent push. Now, if you take things public, it's the good old airing of your dirty laundry.
Yeah.
And is that the right way? That's a conversation for another day because I want to head on over to the I want to stay in the English Premier League though, but head on over to Manchester United. There's only a couple games in, a draw and a loss, but Ruben Amorim is barely weeks into his Manchester reign, and already fans and media are saying he's the coach under the most pressure in England. Earlier, I talked about Juventus being the storied franchise. My
Yeah.
goodness, where do we even begin with Manchester United? So they're coming off a 1-1 draw against Fulham after that promising game against Arsenal. But like fair foul, is Ruben already on the hot seat in Europe?
Here I'll say foul. And stay with me, I will tell you
Okay.
why. Because I think the standard and the expectations, the belief that storied franchise, once perennial winning franchise, has fallen so far that now he might be granted a little bit more time. Because he's a fundamentalist. He's dogmatic in his approach. He'll only play one way, that 3-4-2-1, and it's square peg, round holes, and middling results, and players rotting on the bench, and but now he's had a preseason with this team. Even in their opening match versus Arsenal, they lose 1-0, but there's crumbs of optimism and glimmers of hope in the performance despite the loss, and that's acceptable, I think, internally and for this fan base. So it's where they sit right now, even though I think at this point Amorim's Premier League win percentage is less than 25%, which might make him give him the least winning percentage in United's history, or at least in over a century, which is unacceptable from their perspective. But because they're so low, I think he will be granted a little bit more time. So that seat might be lukewarm, tending towards a little bit hot, but it's not blazing hot, and it's definitely not the hottest seat in Europe because of what's happening with the club.
Real Madrid here. Xabi Alonso has been rotating his lineup. So 1 week, Vinny Jr. starts, the next is Rodrygo. Transfer rumors are already flying around both of them. So fair or foul, should Real Madrid offload one of them to bring stability and balance to their front line?
I'm going to go foul again here. I think Xabi Alonso was asked about it, and he said, listen, if this turns into 3 months of constant rotation and limited playing and limited minutes for one player, then it might be more realistic to think about offloading a player, moving him to a different spot so that player gets more minutes and you're utilizing your roster more effectively. But I think if you look at Rodrygo, I think, the futures of Savinho at City might be linked. Because Rodrygo would be one of the names on that list to replace him. So if this gets down the line, perhaps that's something that they're looking at. But I think for right now, at least from Alonso's perspective, it's pump the brakes. We're not quite there yet. I think we're quite happy with our roster and the depth that we have at these certain positions.
Fun. Let's get to our viral moment of the week now. And it goes to Olivia Smith. We talk about her a lot on this show, but she makes history as the first foreign player to win the PFA Women's Player of the Year award after her debut WSL season. And on the same night, Jayde Riviere, by the way, is named to the PFA Women's Super League Team of the Year. So 2 trailblazers right now putting Canada on the global map. And it is worth noting, because I know we talked about Olivia Smith not really being shortlisted for anything when it came to the French Football Federation, who does the Ballon d'Or and all of the awards associated with that. PFA voted on by peers, pretty much looks as well in England. A huge award. How special is this moment? And do you think, what do you think this signals as well for the Canadian players right now over in Europe on this women's side?
Again, I think it's that Canadian brand. It's a familiar kind of refrain that I won't stop talking about. So I think now, a generation later, even though Christine Sinclair only retired a little while ago, you're seeing the likes of Olivia Smith, of Jayde Riviere, at least in England, change minds and change the perception of Canadians. But the fact that Olivia Smith is doing it, it's voted on by peers in only her second professional season, the first foreign player to win it and the first Canadian to win it. Like, this is a huge deal, Andy. So it's making their presence known at the same time as other Canadian footballers are asserting their dominance on the world stage as well, be it in the NWSL, in the NSL, in the Bundesliga if you're Vanessa Gilles, Liga, or elsewhere. I think, Ashley Lawrence been doing it for a very, very long time, sort of cemented herself as one of the top footballers in the year. Khadijah Buchanan, who's coming off an injury, been at Chelsea forever, and before that with perennial winners Lyon. So this is a new frontier, I think, for Canadian soccer. It's that global calling card for the talent that we have here, the players that we're developing, and the robust pipeline that we're creating, and our ceiling is high. So this is just scratching the surface and just the beginning for a player like Olivia Smith.
The Canadian flag is waving proud overseas, that's for sure. And that is another episode of Just Soccer right here on CBC. I'm Andy. That's Amy. We'll see you next week.